That is my mother and me wearing a funny looking hat. She was recently divorced, she was pregnant, and she had 2 babies under the age of 3, and she was in the middle of her PhD. So I guess you could say that my father is responsible for me being connected to the ocean because he is the one that divorced my mother. But my mom wasn't sure what to do with us babies, and she was in a very sad time, even sadder because she was in the middle of this PhD. And so she took me to a seal sanctuary, and I saw seals for the first time. I mean, I don't think she thought that it would go this far, 25 years later. But what she did in that moment was she accidentally instilled upon me this connection with the ocean. And that connection, that moment at 2 years old where I'm drinking a bottle of milk and I'm connecting with these animals, which still to this day are my favourite animal ever, she instilled in me this connection to the ocean. And I wouldn't be standing here today, truthfully, if that moment had never happened. Actually, I can't say that. Maybe I would have seen a fish in an aquarium later, but I like to think that if that moment hadn't happened, then perhaps I wouldn't be standing here today. Oh, I've messed it up again. Oh, crikey. Yeah, no, it's good, we're good. But the thing I want to mention now is that for many of us, maybe not all of us in this room, but for many of us, connection to the ocean doesn't start in the ocean. A lot of people don't grow up by the ocean. A lot of people don't grow up learning about the ocean or connecting with it in the way that some of us here today have. We talked about this already in a session yesterday, but I probably wouldn't be a coral reef biologist if I hadn't seen shows like Blue Planet 1 when I was very young, because I wouldn't have known what a coral reef was. I grew up in England. We don't have coral reefs. I mean, we do have corals, but they're the kind of deep water, cold coral that are less fun, I think, than the tropical kind. And this episode here, Coral Seas, was my first connection to a coral reef, what it was. And after that, I was absolutely enamored. I knew that I wanted to study coral, and this is really what inspired me. And then I know many people as well have been inspired by chasing coral. This came after I'd finished university, but was definitely a huge motivator in me continuing my career in this realm of research. And all of this to say that storytelling like this is such an important way to connect people to the ocean, people who haven't grown up by the sea, people who haven't been involved with the sea. This is a great way to connect people. So, storytelling. I never thought that storytelling would take me to the Arctic, but it has. And now I want to talk a little bit about one of my assignments this year with Oceanographic Magazine. So I'm a storyteller in residence for Oceanographic Magazine, and this basically means that I got given a pot of money about a year ago, and I basically got given free rein to go and find, I think it was 6 stories around the world that I wanted to tell. So what I did is, being the type of person I am, wanting to maximise the amount I could get for this small budget, I grouped up my stories in different regions of the world so I could tell 3 stories in the Arctic, 3 stories in Indonesia, and 2 stories in Timor-Leste. So I've been to the Arctic before. I filmed a documentary there at the end of COVID. It was a documentary that looked at climate change through the lens of women. We sailed, it was a very, very challenging expedition. We sailed from Iceland across to Greenland. We had very bad weather. We were up against COVID. We were up against policy. It was very challenging, and it was my first time ever diving in water that was zero degrees. So this year I wanted to go back, and I've always loved extremes. I love the tropics. I love the polar regions. I think they're super interesting. Maybe because I grew up in the temperate regions, that's why I'm less interested in them, because that was my backyard. But I knew I wanted to tell some stories in Greenland in particular. So this here is, it's probably not what you think it is. This isn't sea ice, this isn't surface ice, this is actually ice that's broken off from a glacier. And that glacier would have crumbled because of climate change. I mean, it would have happened naturally, but because our climate's warming so fast, these glaciers are crumbling more than we ever thought they would. And so my biggest fear going on this expedition was polar bears. Everyone thinks that polar bears are the poster child of conservation, and they're actually doing very, very well in the Arctic. Polar bears are thriving in many places. Of course, in other places they're not, But I was actually worried because for this expedition I was going to be diving, and I like to set myself a challenge. As a storyteller, I like to challenge myself physically, mentally, and want to tell interesting stories. And so I wanted to, again, scuba dive, and this time I wanted to scuba dive with something really, really challenging, and that was big icebergs. So my one fear though at the time was polar bears, because polar bears are one of the only predators on planet Earth that will actively hunt humans. Crocodiles are up there as well. And polar bears are much better swimmers than me, especially with lots of camera gear and a dry suit in the water. And in the area that we were in, there had been several polar bear sightings recently, so I was a little bit worried. But the story that I was telling was one of an ecosystem that is so different to the one that I study here, and that is coral reefs. I wanted to tell the story of ice. At first, I think when I told this to the magazine, they were like, is that so interesting? Ice doesn't really have a personality, it's not an animal. But this iceberg here, for example, this iceberg was once part of the Greenland ice sheet. This is fresh water that is locked up from millions of years ago, and frozen inside it are tiny bubbles of air that have not been released in such a long time. And now, as I said, I already work in bioacoustics. Has anyone heard the sound of a reef before? I'm hoping everyone has. Yeah, the snap, crackle, pop. Well, I was surprised to find that icebergs make exactly the same noise. When they're in the water, they fizz. You can see the bubbles coming out of them. They crackle in the same exact way as coral reefs, which I found so interesting. And it's such an interesting audio experience that is a representation of climate change in a completely different ecosystem. There's me diving with an iceberg. And now, I already said that I was afraid of polar bears, but when I actually went diving in the Arctic, the thing that I very quickly realized is that icebergs are way scarier than polar bears. Why? Because this giant chunk of ice that you've got, you are only seeing 10% of that above the water. So when you jump in the water, you look down, and there is this massive wall of ice, and it descends into the fjord waters below us. And now, again, because of climate change, when we got there, the visibility was very bad, because this year, the plankton season had come late. And it had come so late that it was changing everything else in the fjord. The life that was happening there, right from the base of the food chain, the fish that were present, and even the megafauna that was present. But the scary thing about icebergs is that in the days where the sun is warming, they roll. And so suddenly, you'll see this entire monster of iceberg, you hear this groan and this crumble, and the whole thing rolls and flips. And that's probably why there isn't a PADI course called iceberg diving, because as the guys that I were diving with said, there is no safe way to dive with icebergs. The only safety briefing is, if you hear a crack underwater, you swim away as fast as you can. So every time I heard a crack underwater, I was shaking with fear. And not to mention, it's also much more challenging diving than in Indonesia as well, for the reasons you can see I'm wearing a dry suit. Your hands freeze up, your body's freezing. I got some cold water in my ears and had the worst vertigo of my entire life. And really, this was the most mentally challenging storytelling I've ever done, particularly because with frozen hands that feel like bananas, it is incredibly hard to work a camera underwater. So anyway, I'm in the middle of this assignment, I'm telling a story about ice. I've got these photos already of the icebergs. I've flown my drone over this beautiful ice fjord. The thing about the Arctic that's really cool is you get these really, really long sunsets. They last for like 5 hours, and the sun sets for like half an hour, and then it's back to this wonderful pink twilight again. And I was standing on top of this hill, worrying about polar bears because I was on my own, when suddenly I saw a whale. And now it's not unexpected to see whales in the Arctic, it's actually very common. But you know how I talked about that bad visibility from earlier, with this horrible visibility, which for shooting icebergs was not fun. Something that we did have was this surprise of whales coming along, and this late in the season was very, very uncommon. And what had happened is that with the phytoplankton that had come, that was turning the water very green, it had brought blooms of krill, it had brought blooms of small juveniles, fish were spawning later, and then this meant that we had whales. And very cute, that's a little whale nostril burn iceberg. And they weren't just here to chill, they were here feeding, and they were bubble net feeding. So this ring here, they were doing this behaviour that I'd never seen before, and I've seen it on National Geographic, of course, but the whales dive really deep, and then what they do is they often work together and they blow rings of bubbles, which they were actually feeding on a fish called Caitlin at this point, and the bubbles create this almost like a sonar net around the fish that pulls them into this very, very tight cluster in the middle. And then the whales basically rise up beneath them, and then they lunge feed and close their mouths. And it's just a very, very efficient way of feeding. So suddenly I sent a message to Oceanographic and I said, okay, I've got to change my story. I've now got one on humpback whales, and they were like, cool, why don't you just make it another one? And I was like, great, now I'm giving myself double the amount of work. But something about me and something about my storytelling is that I love telling stories about women. One of the reasons why I'm here today, I've been inspired by so many women, Rose being one of them. Fun story, I actually started after university. I came here and I was a Sharky with Rose 9 years ago. And I love women, I love working with women. Being here was one of the first opportunities I had to work with other women. There were a bunch of Sharkies on the team. Zara was the boss at the time, Rose was the boss. And it was really nice to work with women, because prior to that most of my lecturers had been male at university. Most of my peers had been women, which was very interesting. But it was nice to look upwards and see women doing things there. And anyway, so I kind of made this pledge to myself when I was younger, that I would try and amplify women where I could along the way, and I love photographing women, and I love seeing women doing conservation, because it's not that they do it better, but they do it differently to men. And these women are a great example. This is in Makassar in Indonesia. This is some of the local community at the Mars Reef Restoration Program. Mars has done a fantastic job in training the women. And what they do is they do these big, big reef builds. The community tie on all the coral, and they've restored hectares and hectares and hectares. It's brilliant. But the fun thing is, if you watch closely, the men, it's a numbers game. They tie on that coral as fast as they can. But the women, they tie on the coral more securely, in the right places. They are so much more thorough with it, that they're reef stars. I would love for someone to do a study on this to see who survived better. But my guess would be that it would be the women's. So my second, well, not my second story, but my second big expedition with Oceanographic took me to Timor-Leste to photograph this incredible group of women. They're called the Wawatatopu. I'd heard about them loosely from a friend who'd been out in Timor-Leste. He said, you need to check out these women. They freedive and they provide food for their community. And I said, that's crazy, I've never heard of that before. I've done a lot of research on Timor-Leste. My main story was about blue whales. It's coming out next month. Yeah, very exciting. And so I went to try and find these women. It was a big, big, big trek. You have to go out from the capital city to another island. You have to find someone to take you round to the other side of the island. They have no scuba on that side of the island, so you have to arrange everything before. It was a very kind of challenging logistical setup to get this done. And then I got there and I kind of did what I normally do, which is I threw the plan out of the window and I said, no, I'm going to make a film. I know I need to write an article for the magazine, but I'm going to make a film. So I spent the next couple of weeks freediving with these women, photographing them and filming them. That's me there, photographing them in the water. And so this group of women, they live in a village called Adara in Timor-Leste. And I don't know how much people know about Timor-Leste, but the whole island of Timor is divided into two. You have Timor and Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste was previously colonized by the Portuguese. Indonesia was the Dutch. And once the Portuguese left, there was a civil war that raged for 25, 30 years. Until the UN finally stepped in the early 2000s, and it was horrible. I mean, they lost a huge amount of their population. People in these communities away from the capital city really, really struggled, and so as a result, lots of people relied on fishing to get their primary source of protein. And in this community in particular, I'm unsure how long ago it was, but a Seoul woman, I want to say it was about 50 years ago is when she learned to fish. Her father taught her to fish because of need. They needed someone to start fishing. a woman. They didn't have enough men, so she started fishing. And then she passed on the skills to this woman here on the very far left, Augustina. And then Augustina has trained all the other women in the village. And so now, at the moment, I believe there are 12 Huatatoku. That just means they're fisherwomen. And these women, they go out with these hand-carved spear guns, and they swim out into the ocean and they spear fish. As you can see, they go fishing in sarongs, they go fishing in flip-flops, and these women can move in the water. Let me tell you, I had 10 minutes left. Okay, right, I'm going to race to this. These women could move through the water. I've got freediving fins on, I've got a scuba tank, and these girls are rapid. And the amazing thing is that they're catching fish, and this fish has changed the community. The men still fish, the men provide most of the food, but this fish is sold at the market, which they walk over 2 hours to on the other side of the island. And selling this fish has allowed these women to send their kids to school. So now what they have in their community is educated children. It has changed the face of their community, and these women are completely breaking boundaries. No one else has been doing this in any other community in Timor-Leste. It's just this village here. And it's a really interesting story on the resilience of women and the ability to step up and do a man's job when needed. And it was really, really beautiful to shoot. And the other thing that was very interesting about it was what was the point I was going to make? I'm mind blank. Oh yeah, they're very conscious of climate. They're very conscious of what's happening. Now that the fish that they're fishing aren't as big as they used to be, they know that their reef is being degraded, they know about climate, and really now it's our job to step up and say, okay, how can we best support you in protecting this ecosystem? There's a lot more I can say on this, but I'm actually going to have to skip forwards. That's them helping me with my camera. They thought that I walked too slowly, so they were like, give us the camera, and they charged along with it. That thing weighs like 15 kilograms, so they're amazing, very strong. And these are some of the issues we encountered. There is no cell service in this village, which made it very, very difficult. They speak a very, very local dialect there, so we had to translate through English, Bahasa, the Timor language, and then the local dialect, which was very hard because our translator, a man, decided not to show up. You'd think that months of planning he would show up, but he didn't. And then, of course, they have this big reef flat here, which meant that I had to carry the tanks between this dive centre that we very nicely got to, I say very nicely, we had to pay for them, that we got to drop off tanks for us. So, I apparently need to get through 15 more slides in less than 10 minutes. One of the things, obviously this year with Oceanographic has been really, really amazing, but something that it taught me along the way is that print media is great, writing articles is great, filming for these TV productions is great, but we're not reaching people. I would love to say that the people who read Oceanographic Magazine are the ones making change in the world, and yes, some of them are, but truthfully, the readership numbers are never going to reach as many people as we want them to. Probably not reaching Gen Z, or what's below Gen Z? Is it Gen A? Gen A? Have we gone back to A? Gen A? So, we're in this new era. We're in a new era where we have at our fingertips this ability to use social media to communicate science. That's me talking about an acoustic recorder. And that's something we've never had before. I have a love-hate relationship with the word influencer. I got introduced to Sylvia Earle like 4 years ago at last year Ocean Conference as an influencer. And I was like, I hold 2 degrees, I run a women's NGO with 60,000 members, and I'm a filmmaker, and you introduced me to Sylvia Earle as an influencer. Yeah. And then in the last few years, I've kind of accepted it a little bit more because I'm like, okay, if there's one thing I do want to do with this platform, it's to influence people, to have a better relationship with the ocean, to care more about the ocean, to protect the ocean. So fair enough, maybe influencer is the right word, and maybe I should reframe how I'm looking at that. And to kind of drive this point home as well, someone made this point to me, and now I'm going to make it here. They said, do you know how many people watched episode 1 of Blue Planet 2? Episode 1 is the most watched episode, by the way. Anyone know? Yeah? How many do you think? Yeah. Yeah, well, the actual numbers, 14 million people watched that episode. So that's actually a lot less than most people think. And this is on television, by the way. This isn't counting Netflix, but this is on television when it launched. And that's an amazing number of people to engage. That's an amazing, brilliant number of people. But it's perhaps not as many as we need, and not as many as we expect. And when you look at the breakdown of countries that watched that episode, also not great. Now, how many people watched me take off a dry suit and talk about icebergs? Anyone want to guess? 5 minutes, okay. 20 million people, which was kind of embarrassing actually. It's probably the ugliest I've ever looked in a video. Don't clap. I'm just trying to make a point, which is that someone said this to me, and I was like, that's actually really interesting, because you never think about how much power is actually there now. And the amount of people that this watched, I looked at the breakdown earlier of different countries and different people, and there's suddenly the ability to reach people that had, people who watched Blue Planet and turned that on are people who are like, I'd like to watch a nature documentary, I'd like to do that. How many minutes do I have left? 5 minutes, okay. So social media is so powerful. It's powerful for storytelling. You can tell the stories that you want. But the other thing it's really important for is community. Finding community, finding people here. COVID was amazing for me because I spent so much time online that I met so many women across the industry, and I connected with them. I entered chat rooms with them, podcasts with them, all this kind of thing. And social media is amazing for building community. When I was 21, I did my master's. I won't go into all the reasons, but I was feeling pretty disincentivized by how few women I was seeing in marine science, the sexual harassment, the general harassment, the you're a woman, you can't carry that tank, we'd never let our women do that from a local community I worked with. And so I started this Facebook group, and there you can see at the time it had 102 members. It was called Girls in Ocean Science. A few months later, I think we had over 10,000 women in that group. And this became a safe space for women to talk about issues in marine science, to talk about gender things, to talk about, hey guys, what period stuff should I wear when I go diving? It suddenly was the space where women could talk about these very, very specific things. We then became a charity, and since then we've done lots of different things, which I won't go into. One of them being we wrote the first ever sexual harassment in marine science survey. Horrifying to realise that 80% of women, 78% get experience sexual harassment in marine science. And the other thing that I'm particularly proud of is Empower Ocean, which I'm going to whiz through super fast. So we have a program similar but very different to Coral Catch in Raja Ampat in Papua, and we also have a project in Maldives. And instead of bringing women from all over Indonesia to get trained and do the amazing thing of taking it outside their community, we train women in the local area to basically have more stewardship and a voice in what's happening in their local marine environment. So what do? We empower women, we elevate role models, we increase the visibility of women in diving roles in our community, and the key aim is then that we can have ecosystem resilience. There's so much I could say about this, but I don't have time. So our training program basically looks like we seed into the community skills and resources, we train the women, and particularly we're passionate about training the trainers, so we want to get women instructors from our community, so then they can reinvest the skills and the knowledge back into their community. And then the outputs, of course, would be to be able to have long-term locally led ecosystem monitoring and community-led ocean management, which is really the goal, or at least it should be the goal. So we have 2 projects here and here. We've trained, oh my god, I'm out of breath from talking so fast.
Come on, let's give you another 5 minutes.
Another 5 minutes, thanks Rose. So we've trained 16 women across Indonesia and Maldives, which has been really, really brilliant. And obviously we want to increase this. This is Vita, who is my local project lead. She couldn't be here today. She was supposed to come, but she had an issue with the dive centre, so she couldn't come, and she had to cover someone who had to leave. And this is Selvi. Selvi was the first ever woman that we trained, and I'll just come on to her story again in a second. So what do? Similar to Coral Catch, we do conservation training. Ours isn't as long. I would like it, Rose and I are going to have chats tomorrow, because I'd like to incorporate Coral Catch things into ours. We do dive training, so we're training women up to dive master with the caveat of if they want to. A lot of women tap out after rescue. They're like, no, that's too hard, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's the beauty of choice. Community engagement. So this is a group of women from our island who are snorkeling with a manta ray. Something that really shocked me was the fact that most women in our community can swim, yet none of them had ever seen a manta ray with their own eyes. So we took women snorkeling. We have done a few times with the manta rays there, and where we work in Maldives, we've taken them, they have lots of tiger sharks there, so we've taken them snorkeling with the tiger sharks. And the final thing is we work with the Universitas Muhammadiyah Sorong to do gender data research. So one of the really important things you do when you're setting up a project like this is you have to understand what are the barriers for women, why are women not involved in the ocean, what is the barrier for access, because you can't really start to unpack and tackle these things until you know what is preventing them from being involved in the first place. And I just want to talk a little bit about our survey very quickly. So as I said, most women, we surveyed 3 villages so far, 91% can swim. This is an anomaly in Indonesia. 91% of women swimming is madness. Like in most communities in Indonesia, especially small island ones, a lot of women cannot swim. Papua, where we are, is mainly Christian. Just to add that. But of the surveyed women, 80% don't snorkel or dive, which is crazy to think that nearly everyone can swim, but they're not snorkeling or diving. 82% have children, even the youngest respondents as well. Women in our community have children very, very young. And we looked into this, and one of the reasons why women are having children very young is because 70% don't use contraception. And some of the respondents in this category also didn't know if they were using contraception, which meant they were not using contraception. And the main reason why women are not using contraception is they're worried about side effects. And this is a lack of education. There's a lack of sexual education in our area. And this contributes to women having a lot of children very young on our island and therefore not being involved in the ocean. Interestingly, 80% said the ocean is important for their well-being, which I was really happy to hear because they live surrounded by the ocean. And 100% said it's important to involve more women in marine-related work and conservation, which is great because we happen to be running a training program for conservation on these islands for these women. So to finish off, this never would have happened if we hadn't built Women in Ocean Science online, if I hadn't connected with Rose, if I hadn't connected with so many people. And everyone here today who's volunteered skills, resources, conversations, exchange numbers, the power of community, whether it's virtual, online, social, or whether it's in person, is something that's so underrated. It's something that women do so well. And yeah, this never would have been possible if that hadn't happened. So, thank you. Oh, any questions? Anyone want to ask? Good? It's amazing? One at the back. Oh, okay. You're going to have to shout. Actually it wasn't. So I didn't do the survey. We had students from the university doing it. But I would say it was a learning, everyone who took it did it. There probably was a desire to get the survey over with as quick as possible, which may have led to some, I'm not going to say incorrect results, but maybe not the best representation. So what we will be doing is working with the community more closely to see how we can improve the survey, perhaps going forwards. But no, everyone was happy to take it, which was actually really interesting because we've had the experience in communities before. For example, in our Maldives program, where people just didn't really want to take it, and that was quite challenging. Yeah. Yes. One more there.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I'll ask my question so that you can catch your breath as well. As a question I'd like to ask you that I actually wanted to ask to the previous panel on storytelling is, you talked about the hardship that you can meet sometimes when you work in remote areas and when you face some barriers. But I think just, I don't know, maybe to give a little bit of hope or like a personal message, how do you deal sometimes with like mental health issues, like regarding the sensitivity of some of the project, of some of the subject that you work on? Because like, you're talking about how hard it is like to work, but what about you? Like, what about yourself as a woman, as a human being, like dealing with these projects and having to share the impacts?
That's a great question. So, can I swap the mic? Thanks, I don't have to shout. That's a really interesting question. I'm going to be really candid because I feel like this is a safe space with women. The last few months have been very challenging for me mentally. After the UN Ocean Conference, I felt a lot of hope in the communities that were built there. But I think mentally, to see things happen in the field, ecosystem degradation particularly, and how that impacts communities as well, and then to go to these big stages and see people just outright, I guess, not pledge the things that you hoped for, or not or clap each other on the back for things that won't happen. And I've been to a fair few conferences now. I've struggled a lot since then. Financially, it's a huge stress on my mental health as well. Physically, it's often a huge stress being in challenging environments. And as a storyteller, we're basically programmed to tell a message of hope. Recently, I've had to really dig deep to find that hope again and to find that resilience. I've always thought of myself in my 20s as a strong woman. Anything a man can do, I can do it. And mentally, I lead a lot of teams. I'm used to being a leader. I'm used to being strong for other people. And then this thing happened this year where I feel like I went home, mentally, not physically, I went home and shut the door. And I felt myself sink against the wall. And I suddenly think I processed like 10 years of emotion of being strong in challenging situations, of being strong for other people, of always putting on this face of hope, of always putting on this face of positivity. And I always want to share a positive message because I'm a positive person. But it's an incredibly challenging thing to be resilient all the time. And I'm not very good at living up to my own word, but I need a holiday. And my boyfriend, after the conference yesterday, this amazing uplifting day, I went and I cried on the beach with my boyfriend for an hour because sometimes it's all very overwhelming. And that's not something I ever want to admit, you know, like I'd love to put on this face of being strong and resilient all the time, but recently it's been really, really tough. And a woman said to me the other day, and for the life of me, I cannot remember who, and they said, you've got to stop thinking about hope as like this shiny object that just this light that shines from within, and instead you need to think of it as a discipline. You wake up every day and you choose hope. And I was like, okay, I'll just bully myself into it every morning, and so that is what I'm doing at the moment. I know that's not the most hopeful thing to say, but really, I think we get so used to, as women, putting on this facade and putting on this face and being strong in an industry that demands that of you. I think we have to give ourselves the time and space to reset, heal, and take a holiday. Not that I've done that, but I need to do that, and I've heard it's really good. I think we're out of time now, so I'm going to run off. Thank you all so much.